Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with door prizes. I will have Kendall and Hannah come forward to do those door prizes. And you'll put the names back in for the free registration.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Is it on? Okay. Hello. So we're going to start door prizes. So the first book we have is My Family 4 Floors Up by Celia Krampien. So Hannah's going to draw. All right. Dun, 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 dun. Amanda Jacobs. Is she here? No. Well, someone else gets an opportunity then. All right. Juliana Gaddis. Did I say that right? Woo! So then our next book is Because of You, John Lewis, The True Story of a Remarkable Friendship, illustrated by Keith Henry Brown. All right, you guys ready? All right, Barb Myers. Woo! And then next, we have a Will Hillenbrand original work of art. It's an art preview of Little Red that's due out next year. I'm extremely jealous at whoever gets this. Jade Rush. And now we have 3 different bags of books donated by Sharon Perkins. Each bag has books from the last 40 years of Mazza artists. So these are right here. All right, so the first bag goes to Cassie Greenlee. Here, I can hand them to them if you want to. All right, I'm taking over for a second. The second bag goes to Linda Hatfield. All right, third bag. Vicki McClurkin. Did I say that right? Is she not here? Well, someone else's lucky day. All right, let's see. Do you know how to say that? No. I'm going to try my best. Is it Persian Chapman? Pierceson. And Chapman is the last name. I know how to say that one. No? All right. Someone else's lucky day. Luann Vandenmark. Oh. Yeah, unfortunately, I believe they have to be here. All right, Deb Jackson. Woo! And then our last 2 items we have is a free general registration to the 2023 Mazza Summer Conference. So we have two of those. All right, the first one, Carrie Kramer. No. Amanda Jacobs. Where is everybody? Vicki Barker. Elizabeth Zemansky. Good job. And that concludes our section of this.
Thank you so much. You know, as well as I do, how busy these young people are. Last night we had 2 of them that could not be at dinner right at dinner because they were coming from track practice, cross-country practice, basketball. So I just cannot thank you enough for all that you are giving up to be here today. I would like Heather Sensel to come up for just a minute. She's going to share a couple things with you. Heather is our education manager for the Mazza Museum.
Hello, everybody. So I tried not to have coffee knowing I'd have to get up here, but I failed. I've had about 3 cups, so bear with me. Anyways, Ben asked me to go over what's happening at Mazza and STEAM, so I'm going to give you a rundown. And the docents, you know what I mean by that. It's going to be a rundown. So basically what I want to talk about first is you received a sheet in your packet. So I see a lot of familiar faces, but I also see some that I don't know. So this is just about volunteer opportunities, things that you can do at Mazza, whether to be a docent or you want to work in the gift shop. If you know somebody in our area, feel free to share that with them. If you're ready to retire, we can help you house hunt. You can move here. That'd be fine too. We would love to have you. So it's a great place to feel like you can get involved and be in a family. And you'll see why when I go over what's happening here just until actually the end of this year. So we've got this coming week, we have the Girl Scouts of Northwest Ohio are coming over to our STEAM Center. And what we're doing with them is an actual STEAM camp where we're going to take them through the museum. They'll come over and we'll talk about different ways that women have made a difference. And we work with the marathon group Women in STEAM. And then we will also take them, they get to visit our planetarium and things like that, but we'll actually do a hands-on activity with them in the STEAM Center. Right now we have 45 of those girls signed up, so we're excited to get them in there and see what we have. We also have a Tales for Top program that's running right now. It runs from November through April. That's the first Wednesday of every month. This is the first year I don't think she's here. Wait, is Amanda, are you out there somewhere? Wave to everybody. Amanda Sprague actually has stepped up this year. She's taking that program over. And funny story, because I'm like, yep, I'll back you up. I'll get things ready. You just come in, because she's an incredible, you talk about somebody who can read a book. She can read a book. And she couldn't come to the last one, and guess who had to do it again? So I was laughing because we'd built the program up where we had a lot of kids that were close to fifth, like getting right before they go to school. So they kind of knew the program. Well, we're building again. So we had a lot of little ones. I had them on my lap, on my leg, on my you're trying to do the book, and half of my voice was gone by the time I was done. But we're excited to have all those kids back. And like I said, she's going to be the forefront of that program, and we're excited to have her. And then we also have Fun Day Sundays. If you haven't heard of a Fun Day Sunday, it is a great community event that's completely free. We just had our first one. They run November through April also. Our first one was Forest Frenzy, and we had 550 participants, so that's nice. Now that's parents and kids. It's kind of geared, I would say, K through 5th grade, but with the STEAM Center, you could probably even move it up a notch. But the best part about it is it's an opportunity to come somewhere from 1 to 4. It's totally free. Put those cell phones down and engage with the children, even grandparents. So it's just a great atmosphere. We have 15 to 20 stations, and half of them are STEAM related, and the goal is that they are learning without even knowing that they're learning. And the next one will be a Christmas hoedown. So if you're feeling a little bit like a hoedown, come see us on December 4th, and Santa will be here. So that will be our next one. And again, those run consecutively every month. We try to hit the first Sunday, but in January, I know we're on the 8th, so that's the second one. I'd also like to talk about a couple clubs that we have coming up. We kick off in February 2 different STEAM clubs. Actually, one's been going on. With the collaboration of Dr. Carrie Teeple. She runs the Littles, is what I'm referring to it as now. I'm very jealous of that, but she gets the 2nd and 3rd graders right now, and she's actually stepped up to do that again for us this next February. We will be bringing in the 6th through 8th graders, and we will be doing our second STEAM Club. And what that is they go through a 5-week program. We work with our professionals here on campus, our professors, and the Mazza staff. We create a program, an hour and a half long. They run it for 5 weeks, and then they earn their lab coats. So some people have earned theirs last year, and they get a badge. So then those badges we're hoping, or someday, are going to be filled all over it, and they'll become our volunteers, as well as maybe, even attend the University of Findlay. One thing that it has evolved from that also is we do a DNA and forensic camp, which won't be till summer, and but they can put that badge on as well. We're going alien style this year, so if you have any grandkids in the area and you want to bring them, take a week and come help us with that. So the last one that I want to talk about is kind of special. We've done it for 3 years. We run them with the Findlay Hancock Library. It's Telltale, and I know some of my docents will be shaking their heads right now. So I got involved 3 years ago with that and had quizzed them and said, gosh, this is great. I love judging the stories, but why aren't people drawing pictures? Why aren't we illustrating the books? So she said, do you want to write a rubric? I said, yeah, I do. So we did cover art. So this will be our 3rd year of doing that. And we had I think it was maybe 16 the first time, then we were up to 30, 40 kids. It's broken between K through 5th, they get a topic. And then what I love about it is I try to express was you could write the book, but somebody else could illustrate the cover, right? You don't have to be the one that writes, so to try to get that format going. So this year at the meeting, they asked me again, are you gonna have a workshop? It'd be great. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because we have so much going on. And I'm like, So I went to Mr. Sapp, Ben Sapp, and said, Ben, do you think we could call somebody like Will Hillenbrand? Would he maybe do a little video? So he was gracious enough to get Will on the phone. We talked, and I laughed because by the time Will was like, yeah, I'll do it. When do you need it? And I'm like, 2 weeks, end of December. No, I said, no, really December. I literally, the next week, it's in my inbox. He's already revised it. I mean, it's phenomenal. And the best part is the teaching professionals from the high school now come over, and they're going to be doing some of the kindergarten tours with me to get some hands-on experience while they're in school. And I love the fact because they do a project that they're making a book. So we're going to be able to put it in their hands. And I've even talked to some BGSU people here. We're going to put it into that strand when they come to see us too. So we have a lot going on. And the best part about Mazza is I can say this is what we have going on. And there will be 20 things added by the time we leave the building. But it's okay. That's what we like to do. So I hope you enjoy your time. We love that you're here. If you have little ones, you can pick up one of our Tales for Tots Fun Day Sundays. And if you have any questions about any of the other programming, please just get one of the staff members and they'll be glad to answer it for you. Okay? All right, let's enjoy.
Thank you, Heather. As she said, there are a lot of things going on, and it would not be possible with many of you that are sitting out here today, and we thank you, and we look forward to having new folks be a part of our team. So, at this time, I would like to have Bethany Smith come forward.
Hi, I'm Bethany Smith, and I get the awesome opportunity to introduce this awesome author and illustrator here. She grew up in a small wooded town in South Bruce, Pennsylvania of Ontario, Canada. She loves reading and interacting with nature. She attended Sheridan's College to get her Bachelor of Applied Arts in Illustration. She started out illustrating for newspapers and magazines like Globe and Mail, which is a Canadian national newspaper, as well as Scientific American, the New York Times, and Reader's Digest Canada. She's currently living in the Niagara region of Canada and excitedly waiting for 2 new books, which I will let her talk more about that. I reached out to her from finding her on Instagram. I promise I'm not a stalker. But with so much on her plate, I never really expected a reply anytime soon. But with my surprise, she actually responded to me within 4 days, which I thought was awesome, which shows me the kind of person she is. And seeing her interact with her fans is incredible, and I love seeing her interact with them. She cares about them so deeply, and that's super admirable. So first, let me say how lucky I am that I got to introduce you today. And so please give a warm welcome to the lovely Celia Krampien.
that was so sweet. Okay. Sorry, I'll get set up here. Thank you so much, Bethany, for that really nice introduction. Bethany's been so great touring me around. I'm a little hapless when I'm on my own, so thank you, Bethany and Gail. I appreciate you looking out for me this weekend. And thank you, Ben, as well, and everyone here at the Mazza Museum for making me feel so welcome. Hearing these wonderful speeches and being surrounded by so many people with such a genuine passion for children's literature, it's a real treat. As Bethany said, my name is Celia Krampien, and I'm an author and an illustrator, and I make books for young people. So that's me up there. With some things about me, they're very important facts, obviously. I like cats and dogs and coffee. I saw Vanessa had like her Instagram handle, and I was like, oh, right, that's what you're supposed to do next time. So prepping for today, I watched some speeches online by creative people, and I noticed a lot of them started with a quote. So I thought, yeah, let's do something like that. I combed the internet, reading, some of our finest literary minds and our most enduring philosophers, and I couldn't really find anything that fit. But later that day, I happened to flip on the radio, and I found a quote that I actually thought might work. I love when that happens. So this is it. It says, you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, well, you just might find you get what you need, by Mr. Keith Richards and Mr. Mick Jagger. I assume you've heard of them. This song has been stuck in my head for a really long time now. So I've wanted a lot of things in my life. I'm still waiting on my parents to come through with a pony, but I've been very privileged to often have what I needed. And looking back on my life so far, what I've often needed was books. And it wasn't just that I had books. It was that I had adults in my life who understood the importance of access to books. And it was largely unfettered access to. I grew up in the 90s, and I don't really remember anyone telling me what I should or should not read. And if they did, not enforcing it in any meaningful way. So I am one of those people who read Stephen King, way too young. But it's okay, I'm all right mostly. I survived in any case. I grew up in a rural area of southern Ontario in Canada in a house in the woods. It was very quaint and quiet. But it was also kind of isolated. We didn't have any nearby neighbors, and the closest town only had about 400 people in it. I had lots of friends, but it wasn't so easy to see them outside of school hours, always being an adult to drive and pick up and drop off. So I often needed ways to entertain myself. I spent a lot of time exploring the woods, daydreaming, drawing. I love drawing. It was one of those things that as a kid, people kind of told me I was good at, and as a shy kid, it was nice to have something for people to look at and tell me that I was doing well without it, being directly at me. It could be an external thing. And another thing I really loved doing, and probably my favorite way to pass the time, was reading. I've got documentation to prove it. This is me again. This is me at age 7, and I think our teacher had gone around and asked us all what we wanted to be, and I wanted to be an artist because I love drawing so much. But what I liked to do was read, and apparently help my mom with my baby sister. I think that last part probably fluctuated a little bit over the years, but she's great. We're good pals now. She actually just got engaged, so really excited for her. So books have been a constant in my life. They came to me with school and to sleepovers, and when my parents would drag me along to their dinner parties. Any spare moment I had was spent adventuring through mythical lands or solving mysteries. With a book, I always felt like I had a friend with me. The constant companionship of stories made me feel safe too. Books were like these portable escape hatches, so if I was ever feeling uncomfortable or out of place, and as a pretty shy kid, that was like a lot of the time, I could easily slip into a story. And that story might have these twists and turns, or moments of terror or mystery, cliffhangers, or even a happy ending. But that was all right, because even as a kid, I understood that everything that was going to happen, even the things that left me disappointed or filled with questions, all that was done in service to the story. And I think there's a certain comfort in that, picking up a book, expecting the unexpected, but trusting that there would be some sort of purpose to it all, as long as I hung in there long enough to find out what that was. Making books is my job now. Sometimes I get to write, but most of the time I draw. I've gotten to illustrate some picture books. These are some of them here. The first is Sunny, that I got to write and illustrate. There's Secret Agent Guy, written by Kira Bigwood. My Family 4 Floors Up by Carolyn Stetson. And Here to There and Me to You by Cheryl Keeley. For other books, I just draw and I only do the covers. So here are some of the ones I've been able to work on, and I've been able to work with some truly talented authors. One of the perks is that I get to read these books kind of early in the process before a lot of people have gotten to read them, and it always makes me feel really special. And my publisher would like me to tell you that they're letting me write a lot more words now. This is my first middle grade novel. It's called The Bellwoods Game, and I've been working on it for the past few years. It's also heavily illustrated with a mix of kind of paneled artwork and spot artwork. It's a story about friendships and the power of stories and a ghost who lives in the woods. So if my publisher asks you, I did say that it was happening. It'll be out next July. Being immersed in stories all day for my job is a definite perk, but like all jobs, it can have its challenges. My main challenge these days is kind of juggling deadlines. On a deadline, it can be difficult to create work that feels fresh and fulfilling to me as an artist, but also balances the needs of everyone else involved, like the author, the publisher, the marketing department, and they have a lot of needs, the marketing department. And of course, the most important is the needs of the reader. Sometimes I don't get that balance quite right, and that's when I get emails like this, which are always fun days. But that's something we all deal with, right? We take the good with the bad, and then we try to wrangle our experiences into something useful or at least bearable. I think that's kind of what the process of making books or making any sort of art really is all about. This sort of tug of war between our best intentions and these unpredictable outside forces. And as much as I personally dread surprises of any kind, I've come to understand that they're kind of an also integral part of the creative process, whether it's an accidental combination of colors that brings an image together or an overheard conversation that sparks an idea. I think all art, to some degree, requires a sort of embrace of the unexpected, or speaking for myself at least, like an uneasy truce with it. And this is my roundabout way of introducing what I wanted to talk about today, how I've personally come to make peace and sometimes even appreciate the unexpected. So back when I was procrastinating, when I should have been writing this presentation, along with the starting quote, I also noticed that a lot of speeches online had these like really long, impressive titles. So I wanted to come up with one like that for mine. This is what I went with. It says, "Books as a Constant, the Perfectionist's Guide to Learning to Embrace the Unexpected, or Doing My Best After a Good Cry." So it's long. I think I nailed that part, but I don't know how impressive it is. I wanted to add that last bit in too because I wanted to keep this talk honest, and honestly, When I'm having a hard time, I do often need a good cry before I'm ready to get up and get going again. Being cool with the unexpected is kind of a tricky topic for me. I have perfectionist tendencies, and I tend to spend a lot of time and energy making my life as predictable as possible. The masochist in me has chosen a very unpredictable career. And I'm very much the opposite of those classic creative types, those who seem to thrive on experimentation and spontaneity. But as much as it pains the compulsive planner in me, I have to admit that the most pivotal moments in my career so far have been the ones I never expected. For example, I wasn't always so confident I'd become an artist. In the yearbook following the one I showed earlier when I was 8, I had already abandoned art as an ambition, and I had decided to become the world's first veterinarian/figure skater. I know. These are careers that naturally go together. It's funnier still if you know how uncoordinated I am and how frequently I cry at pictures of sad dogs. So it was not going to have any success there. And while my passion for drawing goes way back, it wasn't until high school that I thought I might make it a job. My mom had heard about this place called Sheridan College. That's it there. One of the buildings, anyway, one of the nicer buildings. It was a school about 3 hours away from where I grew up in Ontario. And among other things, they taught people how to animate for film and TV shows. She knew I wanted to do something creative, and she encouraged me to go, because I have a really cool mom. And I thought, yeah, let's do that. It sounds like a real job that will let me draw all day. So I made a portfolio, I sent in my grades, and I did not get accepted. I was pretty disappointed at the time, but not wholly surprised either. It was a competitive program, and even I suspected that I wasn't ready. I still ended up going to Sheridan College, though. I made a backup plan, of course, and I enrolled in a 1-year general arts course that would allow me to prove my skills and reapply to animation the following year. But some unexpected things happened during that first year. The first was I made a bunch of really good friends, people I wouldn't have met otherwise if I had done anything else that year. I didn't want to embarrass anyone, so these are just our hands. But this was after a big paint event at the local pub, and it was kind of a thing where you brought in whatever you had and then you would paint on it, and that was the whole theme. And we were really broke college kids, so it was all like found objects or things we got at the Value Village. I don't know if you have Value Village here. Is that a thing? Okay, cool. And this isn't everybody, but I managed to find a sort of family at school, people who became a support system for me. We ended up living together for 4 years while we all finished our college degrees. And they're still very important to me, and we cheer each other on still in our various creative pursuits. The second unexpected thing that happened was I decided not to reapply to animation. Sheridan does this thing where the teachers hang student artwork in the hallways. And over the course of doing that general arts course, I found myself drawn to the hallway where the illustration students had their classes. I didn't really know much about illustration back then, beyond this kind of vague idea that they did picture books. But the more I found out about illustration, the more it sounded like it was the right choice for me. And this is what illustration is all about, although I think other speeches have kind of covered it really well already. Illustration uses pictures to communicate ideas and tell stories. So I formed a new plan. I applied to the illustration program, I got accepted, and spent the rest of college learning how to be a better artist and how to communicate with pictures. One of the classes I had was nude figure drawing. I was going to include examples, but I wanted to keep this like, a family presentation, so I skipped that. We'd stand at these wooden easels with these big pads of recycled paper, and we'd have models come in and they'd pose for us, and we'd be up there trying to capture their gesture and form, usually as quickly as possible. Figure drawing is not my strong suit, but it was still a class that taught me a lot all the same. I remember this one class I had, we were supposed to be experimenting with different media, and I had this paint and these different brushes. And somehow I ended up with like a couple pretty decent drawings. And I was pretty jazzed, like uncharacteristically proud of myself. And my professor noticed and he came over and we chatted. And he was excited about the work, but I think more so he was excited about me being excited. And we talked about how that's the whole point of experimenting with different media, pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones, and how while the results can vary, sometimes you end up with this kind of serendipitous image afterwards, which makes it all worth it. This was an important learning moment for me, the perfectionist who kind of demands to be in control all the time. Knowing that I need to worry less about the process and worry less about the results and focus more on the process instead, and just to be open to anything and everything I might learn. I've tried to carry this mindset with me ever since, especially when I started trying to make children's books, which even after graduating from an illustration program, I didn't do right away. After graduating, I started working as an illustrator for newspapers and magazines, doing what we called editorial illustration. This has kind of been what my college program had been geared towards, at least when I went there. Here's some of the work I was making after I graduated. So these are some images I did for the Canadian newspaper, the Globe and Mail. I wasn't an employee, but I worked for them quite frequently. These are more for the Globe and Mail. I think I just only included ones from the Globe and Mail. Editorial illustration is a bit different from children's books. First, it's more about communicating an idea rather than telling a story. It's also much faster paced. Whereas I might have several months to work on a picture book, I might only have a couple weeks to do an illustration for a newspaper or magazine, and sometimes only a couple hours. I had this one regular client, and our schedule was kind of like this. The art director would send me an article that needed an illustration at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. I think that was when the writer was done writing it or something like that, so that was kind of our cutoff. I'd read the article as fast as I could, scribble some ideas. I'd send them to her, and we'd chat and coordinate a final direction for the image before she went home at 5 o'clock that evening. And then it was my job to have the finished artwork ready by 10 a.m. the next morning so it could go to print. This was in the early 2010s when hustle culture was really big. So now it seems just bananas to me, but that was acceptable back then for some reason. Those nights were always pretty rough, and I learned to work fast, which was useful. And while I was grateful to have the opportunity to illustrate regularly and get paid regularly, it was exhausting. It was somewhat manageable for me when I was an energetic 20-something. I was pretty healthy. I didn't have any dependents to care for, but it just didn't seem feasible long term. Also, besides these few regular clients I had, I wasn't having a lot of luck finding other publications to work with. My work didn't seem suitable for kind of that hard-hitting news or for those highbrow literary publications. I was often assigned these first-person narrative-style articles, often drawing animals and children, and trying to capture the feel of the article rather than convey a sharp image. This should have been a clue that maybe doing books was a more appropriate avenue for my work, but actually it didn't occur to me until a couple years after I'd been doing this sort of illustration. I remember the exact day I actually had that brainwave. I'd been working part-time in this warehouse to make some extra money. It's a really weird job for me. I don't know why they hired me. It wasn't a great job, and they made me wear these steel-toed shoes, obviously for safety. But the only ones they had in my size were black with these pink accents all over it. And if being 5'2" and the only woman in a warehouse full of dudes didn't make me stand out, having hot pink shoes really did. But all the guys were really nice. And it was a steady job, which is kind of what I needed at the time. I would wake up at 4:30 in the morning. I would go in. They'd let me work through lunch, which was nice because then I could leave early and go home and work on illustration, which is really what I wanted to do. One day after finishing up a shift, I stopped in at our local bookstore I didn't have a lot of money, so I was just kind of browsing, admiring all the covers. I was feeling really down that day, bummed that I had to get up at 4:30 every morning. And I started reflecting on why I was at the bookstore, how I always seemed to find my way to books when I was having these feelings of, feeling adrift, feeling lost, feeling like I wasn't happy with where I was going in life. And as I wandered the bookstore, looking at all the beautiful covers, I thought, why am I not doing this with my life? Like, I'm an illustrator, I love books. Maybe that's what I should be doing. I didn't really know how to go about making that happen. I didn't have any contacts in children's publishing, but I thought, I might as well try. So I went home and I started making a new portfolio, one with images I hoped would be suitable for children's books. Here are some of my early attempts. Once I had created enough images I was kind of happy with, I started sending my portfolio around to art directors and publishers, and I didn't hear anything back. But I kind of expected that. That's the way it goes. It takes a little bit of time to get on people's radar sometimes. But I knew it was important. I kept trying. So I made more work, and I updated my portfolio, and I sent this updated portfolio around, and I didn't hear anything back. After doing this a few times, a kind agent, a literary agent, took pity on me, and she said, while there were some lovely qualities to the work I'd been sending, they weren't really conveying this feeling of a larger story happening. But she did tell me to keep drawing, which was really nice of her, and she didn't have to do that, so I appreciated her taking the time. It's always difficult to be rejected, but I have a lot of practice at it, and I do know it gets a little easier over time. So instead of focusing on the rejection, I saw this as a tremendously useful note, not just because it gave me a better idea of how to approach my work going forward, but it was a clue that I maybe didn't have a good grasp on picture books as a medium yet. And I realized that if I wanted this to be a lasting career, I had a lot more learning to do before I was ready. So I started asking myself a lot of questions, and then going about and finding the answers. So I asked myself things like, what picture books do I like, and why? What books don't I like, and why? Who's making these books? What do my favorite authors and illustrators have to say about making picture books? And I started asking myself a lot of practical questions too, like how many pages are in a typical book? Who are the publishers I'd like to work with? How do I get my work in front of these publishers, and what are they looking for? And how can I make work that's unique to me, but still useful for picture books? Whenever I had questions, I turned to the internet or books for answers. I read a lot during this time, and the more I read, I would have more questions pop up. And the more questions I had, the more I read, and so on and so on. And so I started making work with a slightly more informed approach going forward. So this is some of kind of like my later attempts. At this stage, I realized I learned a lot about the adults involved in publishing, authors, illustrators, editors, and agents, but I didn't know a ton about the kids involved, the people who would hopefully be reading my books. Obviously, I remember from when I was a kid, but it'd been a little while, and I didn't have any kids of my own. So I decided to volunteer as a preschool reading buddy. I had no idea what to expect when I signed up, but I ended up loving it a whole lot. I kind of treated it as like a fact-finding mission, so I thought I would share some of my top secret findings with you today. All right, secret number 1. The most loved book is also the most beat up. This probably isn't much of a secret to people with kids or who've worked in classrooms and libraries, but I quickly noticed that it's easy to spot the most favorite book on the shelf. Because when it comes to picture books, nothing says love like a battered and torn cover or an empty shell of a book with all the pages stuffed back inside. I've come to believe that there's probably no higher achievement than having a book pulled apart by enthusiastic hands. Because I think that means the book was worth picking up over and over again. It means it was worth keeping around, even though it's just a loose collection of paper or has been scribbled over with marker and crayons. I think it means the book has been enjoyed. And I think that means the book has probably done its job. Secret number 2, you don't have to be able to read yet to read a picture book. So there's this one little guy at preschool, and he insisted on reading me stories. And it didn't matter that he couldn't read, because all he had to do was pick up a book and make up a story to match all the pictures. And he was great at this. He could pull like a dozen different stories out of one book alone. Even other kids would like gather around just to hear his stories. Like, he was doing way better than I was. So just a note to other authors out there, like, when we spend hours agonizing over the perfect picture book test, there are kids out there who will effortlessly make up a story on the spot in front of an audience, and all they need is some pictures to guide them. I've had to live with that knowledge, and now you do too. Number 3, books can be more than stories. There was another little guy who loved poring over books, usually on his own. I crouched next to him one day while he was flipping through a book and asked if he wanted to read with me. I started reading the words out loud, and he quickly shook his head. Instead, he pointed to the illustrations on the page in front of him. He touched a star with one finger, and catching on, I started to count out loud. And this turned out to be exactly what he wanted. After we counted stars, he flipped the page and he pointed to the polka dots on a character's nightdress, so we counted those too. We counted everything we could find in that book, scouring the pages for little details. So I think of him when I start new picture book projects. I try to think of all the things I can do as an illustrator to engage readers like him who might be looking for a little more than a story in a book. Secret number 4, not every book is for every kid, and that's okay. This is an obvious one too, I think, but it was a good reminder for me. What happened was, it was the beginning of a new semester, so we had a whole new group of kids, and this was their very first day of preschool. It was a difficult day. Some were looking a little lost and overwhelmed, so I invited a group to come sit with me and read. I grabbed the nearest book on the shelf, and it happened to be about this giant with a head cold, and to feel better, that giant had to eat children. It's a good book, I promise. So I started to read, and like most weren't really paying attention. You know, it was a big day. Everyone was feeling a little lost. But I noticed one person was paying very close attention. And at first I thought, great, I am rocking this. But as I read, I noticed her eyes started to get wider, and her face started to stretch like this. And I thought, oh no. So I quickly put the book down and picked up another one to read. And we went on to be good friends, her and I, so I don't think I scared her too badly. But it made me remember, I think that's what's so great about books, is that, sorry. A book can be easily put down if a reader isn't ready for it yet. The reader can return to it when they are ready, or a different book can be enjoyed instead. I think that's why we need books of all kinds, because we have kids of all kinds. They have unique preferences and needs, and our books should reflect that. Secret number 5, this is my last one. Books can turn a day around. This was my favorite memory, I think, from the whole experience. One little guy, he was having difficulty settling into preschool, and like, fair enough, right? Like, if my mom dropped me off at a strange place and I didn't know when she was coming back, like, I'd be pretty upset too. It's not unusual for kids to struggle with transitions, but he was having trouble settling in kind of week after week. I would try to engage him in reading, and he was never quite ready to be distracted from his worries yet. But one week I noticed him carrying a book around. So I asked if he wanted to read it, and to my surprise, he said yes. So we started to read, and all of a sudden he was laughing and being silly with me. He would shout out words from the book and repeat phrases. Even other kids gathered around because we were obviously having such a great time. Now, I don't know if that book was like a particular favorite, or maybe it just hit the spot in that moment. Or maybe I'm the best reading buddy, who knows? But whatever magic was at work, he was so much happier after that story. It was the first time I'd seen him look worry-free since I'd been volunteering, and later his mom got to pick him up and see him smiling and relaxed for the first time. The experience meant a lot to me. I've always known books to lift my mood. Being able to play a small part in doing the same for another person, and seeing how much a story could affect them, that was really special. Whoops. There's no slide change there. After the time I was volunteering, I started getting some assignments from small press publishers, illustrating picture books and doing covers for novels. These were great learning experiences, but they were kind of few and far between. I was kind of eager to do more, and I wanted to kind of prove myself, and I started to wonder, what if I could write my own books? Instead of waiting for a publisher to find me, why didn't I write my own story? I didn't know much about writing at the time. Beyond what I'd done in school, I'd always kind of been the artist. My best friend growing up, she'd been kind of the writer. We'd always collaborate, we'd make book stories together. In high school, we had an English class together, and instead of paying attention, we drew these comics. It was like serialized, of course. And it was about this grim reaper whose name was Snuggles. He was kind of this hapless guy. It was like if Charles Schultz made that like Dead Like Me TV show with Mandy Patinkin. I don't know if you remember that one. But stuff would happen, like he'd lose his robe at the laundromat, or he'd try to reap souls and people would run away. So she's still a writer, actually. She's a journalist now. She's worked for like Vice and 538 and stuff. I'm very proud of her. So it feels a little strange to be writing now, but I thought, if I had to wait for publishers to come to me with opportunities, why shouldn't I just make my own? So that's what I did, or what I tried to do anyway. I started writing stories. Most of the early ones, I won't say like not good, but I will say like no one beyond my mom would ever want to read them. Sometimes they didn't have endings, or they fell flat, or they felt like too much like other books that already existed. And finally, after a lot of not so successful stories, I managed to write one that felt a little different. This one held together better than the rest of them. It had a solid beginning, middle, and end, and it felt like it could become something more. So after I wrote the story, I made what's called a picture book dummy. It's not a very nice name, but what it is like a rough version of what a story could look like if it was made into a book. So here's the cover for the dummy I made. It was called But Not Sunny back then, and I sent it to a few people. And luckily, I found an agent who thought it had some potential. She helped me find an editor who, fortunately, thought so too. We signed a contract, we made some changes to the story, which made it way better. I did the final artwork, and then a whole year later, I got to hold the book in my hands. So this is me at my book launch. This is February of 2020, kind of a weird time. And this is my book. It's called Sunny, and it's about a girl named Sunny whose rainy day walk to school doesn't quite go as planned. I won't read the whole thing, but we'll kind of go through it. It's got this whole kind of repeated phrase, and it starts off with saying that most people don't like rainy days, but not Sunny, who thought it was the first day, or the perfect day to use her big yellow umbrella. But then she kind of gets swept up into the air, and that's when things start to go off the rails. She ends up soaring through the sky, but it's all right because she enjoys the view of the little town and she makes a friend. I know Raul talked about putting his dog in his illustration. I thought that was fun. I try to do that too, so I've got a little beagle in here, and maybe you can spot it. And throughout the whole book, Sunny tries to make the best of things, but the situations keep getting like more and more unhinged. Like she drifts out to sea, and she falls into the ocean, but she lands on a boat, and she thinks, well, I'd rather be boating right now than swimming, so like it's okay. She ends up on a rock, which is okay because it's okay. She's not alone, but then she is, and that's when Sunny can't find the bright side of things any longer, and she cries. So when we sent this book around at first, we got some feedback from editors saying that if we had Sunny cry, it might be too sad. And it is sad to be alone and lost and kind of away from where you're supposed to be. But I thought it was honest too. Because even if we're able to make the best of things, we can't do it all the time. Even the strongest, most optimistic people, like, they're not okay all the time, and we can't expect our kids to be either. Sometimes the world is just too much, especially when you're young and experiencing it all for the first time. So I fought to keep it in, and luckily we found an editor who's enthusiastic about keeping it as well. Sunny's story ends up okay. She finds some friends who give her the lift she needs. She gets to school, not in the usual way, and it takes a little bit longer, but she's okay in the end. These are uncertain times. I've needed books more than ever these days as an escape hatch, as a calm, safe place, away from the chaotic world we live in. Life, unfortunately, isn't like a story. We can hope things will be okay, but we never really know for sure. I'm grateful to be here today, celebrating children's books and all they give us. By championing picture books, I think we can all play a part in creating those safe, constant spaces for young people today. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but being here today and seeing all of you, this gives me a lot of hope. So thank you very much. All right, questions. I was just going to leave. How many books? That's a good question. That I've written, I've only written this one, and then that middle grade novel that'll be coming out next year. Yeah.
So you have a rather, limited palette, especially in those early illustrations that you showed.
Yeah.
And you talk so much about just meeting kids where they're at, and understanding that, it is tough to be a kid. Do you keep your color palettes kind of simple like that, just to, relate with them more? Or where did you pick that up?
Okay. Yeah, I think it really depends on the project for me. I think I wanted to keep this one limited because there was this tension between the stuff that was happening and Sunny, and I thought kind of just having that yellow contrasted with that teal kind of went with the theme. But I'm working on another book right now. We actually just wrapped it up. It's going to be coming out next year. And it's with the author Kristen Dixon. It's her debut, and it's called Fiona Builds a Fairy House. It's an amazing book. I'm super jealous that I didn't write it myself. But it's about this little girl named Fiona, and she's obsessed with fairies, and she wants to build a fairy house so she can meet a fairy, and she asks for help, but all of her family members are kind of distracted. There's this wet cat situation, and there's lots of mythical creatures show up. It's a really great book. But for that one, I am actually using a ton of colors. So yeah, it really depends for me on kind of the vibe of the story.
Any other questions? Yes.
So in your speech, you were talking about waiting to get picked up by publishers and clients and things like that, so you decided to write your own books. What was the process of, once you've written your own book, to try to get that noticed by people, and how long did that take, and just what was the method with all of that?
That's a really good question. I don't do a lot of speaking, but I was able to be part of this Children's Book Week in Canada last year, and one of my talks I did, it was called How a Story Becomes a Book and Why Does It Take So Long? And this one, I had the idea for Sunny, and I say it took me a year and 15 minutes to write it because I thought about it for a year and I couldn't figure it out. And then in 15 minutes, it just kind of went onto the page. And then from that point, I made the dummy, and I had done a lot of research at that point, so I had kind of a small list of literary agents who I thought might be appropriate to send it to. I had decided that was kind of the route I wanted to go, that they might make it more feasible to work with certain publishers. And I actually sent them to Agent Stephen Malk. It was really optimistic of me. I was like, I'm gonna start with like a really great agent and work my way down. And I figured he wouldn't get back to me, but he did. And he wasn't going to represent me, but he recommended someone else who thought the story had potential. I think I waited about 6 months after I contacted him, so it can take a little while, but it kind of feels like when things happen, they can happen quickly. And yeah, I think I'd been kind of developing to that point for a couple years up until then too, so it was a lot.
Any other questions?
You said this book was released February 2020?
Yes.
So it almost feels like another beat in the sunny.
Yes, yes,
But
exactly.
Did it throw you, what was that like, having it be released right before the world
That's
shut
such
down?
a good question. I had kind of a lot of plans for how I thought this year would go. I had some book events lined up, and obviously all those fell through. So yeah, I kind of went into almost like a hibernation phase. We were also supposed to have like a picture book that would follow this up, like not necessarily a sequel, but just something kind of in a similar vein. And we haven't been able to kind of find that right story yet. So when we kind of got stuck on picture books, my agent had asked if I'd consider doing like something for middle grade. Because of the style of my work, we would get a lot of feedback being like, we don't want to hire her for picture books, but if you have middle grade projects, so middle grade's kind of like a favorite age range for me. It's some of my favorite stories are in there, so that's why I decided to work on a middle grade novel, and that's kind of how that happened. So yeah, kind of, again, didn't go as planned, but it took me in a different direction, so.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, Celia, we thank you. Truly expect the unexpected. I think each of us, it's good that we're reminded that every book that we sit down with, that we should take that into account, as well as when each of these wonderful people in this front row get up here to speak. We're always expecting the unexpected, and it makes the world in which you create a very special one for all of us that want to share it with the people and the children that we work with. So thank you. I'd like for all of the authors and illustrators to come to the stage for a photo op for all of you as we get ready for our last speaker of the day. So thank you.